you hit the nail on the head. My background's in, MarTech is what we call it, but marketing technology. A lot of that was spent on the B2B side, but also, a little bit on the B2C side as well. So my focus as a software guy, my whole career has been how to be a smart marketer and how to really be powered by tech in that. So understanding, how customers want to be communicated to and yielding the best results for all the marketers out there, specifically doing it in a scalable way. So that's, automation, that's AI, and whatever data informed decision making that we can make. So that's kind of the background that I bring to it on the tech side. And the genesis for, me getting started with NurtureBoss was really my experience as a renter. My understanding of the industry has obviously evolved a lot in the last couple of years since we started the company. And, the experience of the onsite team is a big driver of our product today. But originally, I came at it from the angle of a renter in the apartment industry.
Well, thank you for filling in some of those gaps and are giving us some context there. I think it's really interesting that you mentioned you created NurtureBoss based on an experience you had as a renter. It's very rare that you hear of that origin, particularly in the, you call it prop tech or marketing tech, but in the space where you're talking about multifamily investors and helping through that process, it's rare that the solution comes from the customer's experience. So walk us through, what was the challenge that you faced that led you to create NurtureBoss?
Yeah, sure. So, when you're out there looking for an apartment, new place to call home, you're looking at, 5, 10 different properties kind of in the area and in the price range that you're interested in. And it's a big purchase decision. Where am I going to live for the next year at least? And rightfully so, renters want a lot of information. They want to know obvious stuff like pricing and amenities, but they also want to know things like the neighborhood. What is it like to actually live there in different parts of the building? And you outreach to the on-site teams and you ask for this information. And, it can be really hard to get an answer back. And a lot of times you just don't get an answer back. So what I found is that oftentimes the decision that I made off of where I was going to live was really with whoever was giving me the time of day, which may or may not have been, the best place to move into. And then you move in and you're living there and the communication that you might have had as a prospect kind of stops as a resident. You're wanting to get questions answered. You want to get, things addressed, and it's just really difficult. You go into the office and nobody's available. You send an email, you don't get an answer. After the fact, learning more, you realize how many hats on-site teams are wearing. You understand how busy they are, and that starts to make a lot of sense. But as a prospective renter and a renter, that's not clear, and it just seems like maybe, they don't care, they being the on-site team. And that makes it difficult, living at a place or looking to live at a place and trying to get questions answered and things like that. And that's really the genesis of what led me to think there's got to be a better way here, right? There's got to be a way to let renters get their questions answered, get the communication that they desire so they can feel heard and make kind of a smarter purchase, if you will.
Well, and I think everyone's busy, quote unquote, right today, right now. We know that we have a shortage of labor where it's harder to find great people. So in a lot of these properties, you might be down a person or two that you typically would have. So this is a solution that I think a lot of people could use, whether you are an owner, investor yourself, or you're on the property management side. I think this is something that a lot of people are looking for. Talk to me a little bit more about what NurtureBoss actually does.
Yeah, absolutely. So NurtureBoss's primary goal, simply put, is to automate as much communication as possible. So we do that on the lead to lease side of the journey, as well as the lease to the renewal side of the journey. There's a few ways that we do communication at NurtureBoss. Email messaging is one of them. Text messaging is our primary focus. So via our integrations with all the property management software and CRMs out there, we have a really holistic view of who all the guest cards in your pipeline are, as well as the residents currently living at your property. And we use that information along with our data-informed decision-making behind our automation, AI behind our two-way chat. And we use these tools to create communication for prospects and residents that's delivered automatically on behalf of the on-site teams without taking any of their time. And it's the right message at the right time. And us doing that allows us to drive prospects through the lead to lease cycle, schedule more tours, get more applications submitted, and then really create a delightful experience for residents living at a property, which at the end of the day helps increase renewal rates as well.
Yeah. So as an investor, and I would imagine even as a property manager or regional manager, so the person who might be in charge of the kind of decisions about bringing in different technologies, it comes down to the bottom line, right? Like, sounds good, hear you, recognize it. What kind of results can this actually deliver for the business and the bottom line?
Yeah, so I'll give you a really quick stat. An average increase of, let's say, 15% in applications that we're seeing at a few of our properties is going to net an increase in NOI of somewhere between $100,000 to $250,000. That's going to depend on the property size and a lot of other factors, obviously. But more conversions means more money in your pocket at the end of the day. And I think that's kind of, if you want to speak to the business side, where the rubber really hits the road.
Yeah, you said 120,000, is that what you said?
100 to 250,000 NOI increase is what we can see on average, depending on property size.
Wow. All right. Well, I mean, just if you take the 120,000 at just a 6% cap rate, that's $2 million worth of value. So that's a huge impact that could be had by doing a better job with the communication. You mentioned a 15% increase in leases. Now, I know that, from a process of getting those leases filled, you all focus more on the communication of, taking the lead to a lease. So where do you start in the process as opposed to, marketing for a vacant unit or something like that?
Yeah, good question. So a lead's going to come into the property CRM. That lead's going to come from the places we know: apartments.com, your property website, social media. As soon as that lead hits the CRM, Nurture Boss is going to capture that data and start, programmatically or automatically, if you will, generating a strategy for how to convert that lead. We're going to look at.
I just want to be clear. When we say lead, we mean someone filling out a piece, an inquiry online, or how are you qualifying a lead here?
Yeah, good question. So really anybody that enters into the CRM for the property, somebody walks in because they saw the sign out front and talks to somebody at the front desk, that's going to be a lead for us. Somebody fills out a form on the property website, that's going to be a lead. So really any way that you can imagine a prospective renter expressing interest in the property, that's somebody that via our integration, Nurture Boss is going to become aware of and immediately kind of get to work on.
Got it. Okay. So you were saying that once that happens, Nurture Boss takes over. What's the first step from Nurture Boss?
Yeah. So the first step is we're going to figure out what this person is interested in. We're going to use the data that we have that's been collected, and we're going to figure out what talking points speak most to them. If we know they're bringing a pet, for example, we're going to start giving them information about our pet policy. If we know that they're interested in the fitness center, we're going to send some photos of the gym. So this is what we call hyper-personalization at Nurture Boss. This means that we don't want to send a blanketed template communication out to everybody in the CRM. We really want to understand what each person is interested in and target the messaging to speak to that, so that we can get more tours scheduled, more applications submitted, and ultimately more leases signed. So that's kind of step one, is figuring out what it is that we need to talk about in order to capture the interest of each individual.
And you mentioned before that you do, I believe, a combination of email and text message communication. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll send out emails and we'll send out texts. It kind of depends on things like preferred method of communication and a few other factors. Those emails that we send are, beautiful emails that have a lot of informational data in there, as well as, clear call to actions, other things we've known to work really well for increasing engagement and conversions. And the text messages that we send ultimately drive prospective renters to something we call a nurture page, which is a creation of Nurture Boss. And think of this as a personalized landing page made specifically for each individual that is a great digital resource for them to refer back to gather information, get questions answered, and contact the onsite team.
And what's the time frame, right? Because, a lot of people, when they start that process to look for a new apartment, it might be a couple of weeks, might be a couple of months. So give me a sense of like the time frame of this campaign and the communication that takes place.
Yeah, so we will send our first communication within 30 minutes of the lead being generated. And this is a really important thing to talk about. The stats out there are pretty crazy. There's something like a 60x increase in likelihood of conversion if you can outreach in the first 24 hours. So if you're not getting back to these folks right away, you're losing the business, full stop.
60 times. Wow. A
Yeah, that's right.
60x conversion increase if you can reach out in 24 hours.
Yep. So getting a message to these folks right away is super important. And at NurtureBoss, we're doing it in typically under 30 minutes.
That's impressive. And you said a lot of this is somewhat automated, right?
Yeah, I would go further to say it's completely automated. Now you can kind of throttle down the automation if you'd like. If that's something that our customer prefers, we provide that ability, but it can run fully automated on its own from start to finish, walking that prospective renter all the way through the leasing process, as well as the resident journey as well.
Okay. And then I assume the point here is to try to get someone to sign a lease or to speak to someone live so they can get that process going. How does that conversion work?
Yeah, good question. So we actually provide the ability for prospects to schedule their own tours. That would be the first kind of conversion that we're looking for. So we'll send out these communications, the ability for them to click a button, find a day and time that works for them, and book that tour. Once that tour comes in and the show event, as they call it, is complete, then we'll start advertising online applications, allowing them to, again, click a button, select a floor plan, and submit their online application. And once that application is submitted, it's really in the hands of the onsite team. And there's other, cool technology in multifamily that facilitates the application and leasing process. NurtureBoss's drive is to get that application submitted and that tour scheduled. So those are kind of the two major conversions that we're looking to facilitate along the journey.
Got it. So your two main KPIs then are really getting that tour scheduled and then either an application submitted or I guess a lease submitted. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. And, you talked about in the beginning of the call here, the staffing issues that we're seeing, right? And having the ability to allow prospects to self-serve throughout the journey is a huge way to combat that staffing issue that we're seeing across the country.
No, great stuff there. The thing is, sounds like this could be a great resource for some of the larger apartment buildings and larger communities that are out there. Who is this designed for from a property management or the size of a multifamily property?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we service properties all the way from, let's say 12 units up to 900 units. And the reason that it makes sense across the board is that when you have a 500 unit property, they may be staffed well. That's not a given today by any means, but they may be. But a 500 unit apartment complex is going to be generating many hundreds of leads every month. So it really doesn't matter how many people you have on site. You can't respond to all those leads within 30 minutes, right? Or continue to stay up to date with communication throughout the life cycle. So NurtureBoss provides great value there. On the flip side, if you have a portfolio of 5 properties that are 10 units each, you probably have 1 or 2 people over all 5 of those properties, which is super common for a portfolio of that size. So now you have the inverse problem where you have somebody who's managing several properties. And again, it can be difficult to stay on top of all the communication. So we're seeing great value on both ends of the spectrum for folks using NurtureBoss.
And then just out of curiosity, why not a 2 unit as opposed to 12 unit?
Yeah, good question. So I think that if you have a lot of duplexes, right, dozens of them, something like NurtureBoss could be useful. If you have one property that's a 2 unit property, I don't think NurtureBoss is the right tool for you. And that's something that I think is important for me to say, because I want NurtureBoss to provide value to whoever is using our product. And the last thing I want to do is provide it to, a customer that wouldn't get value out of it. And I think if you have one duplex and that is your whole portfolio, NurtureBoss probably doesn't make sense for you. But as soon as you get up to, a dozen of them, then all of a sudden it starts to make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and let's broaden this out, right? We've obviously talked a lot about NurtureBoss, but I think there's some great lessons and great insights that anyone can employ, whether you have a 2 unit or you have a 200 unit. One of the things you talked about was that immediate follow-up, right? The
Mhm.
60x conversion if you can respond within 24 hours. And then I know you made it a point to try to respond within 30 minutes of that lead coming in. That 30-minute, I don't know if it's 30 minutes or an hour, but what's that cutoff as far as, hey, if you can respond within this time frame, that's really going to be optimal for a prospective renter?
Yeah, if you're setting a goal for yourself, I would set it at 2 hours. There's a lot of good data that also shows a sub 2 hour response time is better than one that takes longer. If 2 hours is unrealistic, I would, the longest I would ever go is 24 hours, but really under 2 hours would be the goal I'd recommend everybody set for themselves.
There you go. So whether or not, you have a single family home or a duplex or 200 units, think about how can we respond within 2 hours of any leads that are coming through. That's going to help to drive your conversion and make it a little bit easier for you to get that lead converted into a lease. Let's talk a little bit more about the scale, right? Because one thing that's
Mhm.
really interesting to me is you talked about, well, if you have a bunch of duplexes, then this can work out. And it kind of leads me to think about property managers, because if you manage multiple properties, this could be a great solution for you to take in, some of these leads, even if it's for different properties. But maybe you could talk about maybe some of the property managers, and you don't have to give names, but property managers that you work with, or some of the folks from that standpoint that are finding value in this approach.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the key things, and we've talked a lot about automation. We've talked a lot about, or I guess implied the time savings that has for on-site teams. So I want to kind of stop touching on those points because I think we've driven those home really well, and talk about some of the other, realities of what attracts property managers to our solution. One of them is that 60% of tours are scheduled outside of office hours, right? So having a way to communicate with prospects and even residents outside of your established office hours is a key differentiator, and nowadays really expectation of a lot of the prospective renters and renters out there. So NurtureBoss provides tools that lets prospects self-serve 24/7. So if they're getting off work and now they have time to schedule a tour, but the office is also getting off work and nobody's around, we can still capture that conversion. So that's a big thing worth mentioning. The other thing that I think is really important to mention is the ability NurtureBoss provides property management companies to have consistent branding across their properties. A brand is such an important thing, and I can kind of nerd out on brands for a little bit if you want, but having really concise and consistent voice and tone of how you talk about your product at the end of the day, right? It's an important product. It's somebody's home, but nonetheless, it's a product. And having a story that you tell is really important. And NurtureBoss makes it really easy for property management companies to consistently speak in the voice of their brand throughout all their communication that comes out of our platform. And I think that's a really big value add that property management companies, especially recently, are really happy with from NurtureBoss.
Yeah, I think too, you talked about the branding aspect, and it's so key because a lot of times you may not have, you may have a vacancy, it gets filled, but if you can redirect some of those leads into either another property or let them know, hey, we've got another unit that's going to come available next month, that may help you stay connected. And then ultimately, some of these residents may look for that property management company first and foremost. And that's something that we see is pretty common because they know what that experience is going to be like. And they want to work with property management companies that they feel comfortable with, as opposed to just looking for a unit or a building that suits their needs. So it helps you to really build that brand and build up that reputation. That's something that's really important, even if you're on a smaller scale, particularly if you do want to, grow into scale and build it up. So great insight right there. As you looked at this space, I mean, certainly there are other players and other solutions that exist. What really drove you to say, you know what, I'm going to dedicate the time, energy, and resources to build this up, as opposed to just leveraging some of the other resources that were out there?
Yeah. So the thing about multifamily that I love is that multifamily only uses products for the most part that were built for multifamily, right? It's a unique industry that is hyper focused on solving their needs. And what this means is that there's a lot of problems that have been solved in the business world that are not solved in multifamily. Right now, there's some good and some bad with that for certain. One of the things I recognized was this idea of automating communication is not a new idea to the world, right? But it is more of a new idea to multifamily. So I was, as an outsider, when I first, joined kind of the multifamily world, was surprised that there wasn't a lot of, automation solutions built already. But there wasn't, and there was a big need for it. And it's something that I know really well and felt like I can provide a lot of value in. So that's kind of why I dove into the communication automation niche, if you will, within multifamily, because I did see a void there.
No, I appreciate you sharing that. What's next? I mean, as you look at kind of the market, you talked about some of the inefficiencies or the lack of solutions that multifamily has that maybe other sectors have already solved. Where else do you see opportunities, and what do you plan on doing next?
Yeah, good question. So right now, one of the things that I think a lot about is centralized leasing. I'm sure that you've heard this come up a lot recently. There's a lot of really smart individuals in the space that are talking a lot about this right now. And, NurtureBoss is built in a way that really allows us to empower owners and property management companies that want to move toward a centralized leasing model. And that's something that I'm spending a lot of time thinking about. And if I had to, give you an answer right now, I'd say we'll drive some of the future of NurtureBoss is going to be geared toward facilitating kind of that new trend, if you will, that I think is here to stay.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of opportunities to tighten things up and improve on some of the processes that exist today. So I look forward to seeing what you do next there. NurtureBoss, you mentioned, focuses more on kind of the middle of the funnel. And for anyone who's not really a marketing geek, there's a funnel that we use. It's like an upside, kind of a, open wide end of the funnel at the top. And then at the very bottom, it gets really, really tight. And essentially what the funnel is, the top are your leads or, potential people who could do business with you. And at the bottom are going to be kind of your loyal customers. So if you're focused on the middle, that leads the bottom and the top as areas that NurtureBoss really doesn't focus as much. Do you plug into existing systems and programs that either investors or property managers are already using?
Yeah. So the way that we kind of deal with the top and bottom of the funnel is with, really strong partnerships and integrations. So, there's some names out there that, everybody knows in the property management software world, whether it be the giants like Yardi in RealPage or some of the newer players that are, absolutely crushing it with providing value, like Knox CRM is a great example. These are folks that we're integrating with and partnering with so that we can seamlessly work with the existing flow from top to middle to bottom of funnel. And that's kind of how we focus on bridging that gap is with those partnerships.
No, listen, thanks. A lot of great information. If you want to learn more about NurtureBoss and what Jacob's building over here, you can check it out at nurtureboss.io. Great information there. Be sure to check that out. Jacob, we're going to go to a round of insights. Are you ready?
Okay. Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Give me a failure or an apparent failure that sets you up for later success.
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier, hyper-personalization is really kind of baked into the culture of our product. But it wasn't always that way. So, the trial and error of learning what works and what doesn't work in terms of communicating with prospective renters and renters was really the kind of failure that led us to succeed from implementing hyper-personalization. So sending out, templated cookie cutter messaging that is not unique or different in any way does not work. And, we learned that the hard way, so to speak. The benefit from that is that, we've really put a lot of time and energy into being super personalized or hyper personalized with everything that we do. So that was kind of the first hurdle that I ran into at NurtureBoss.
Give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
Yeah, so there's a lot of great tools out there that are kind of lead to lease lifecycle assessments. This is the only kind of self-plug I'll do is that NurtureBoss has a great one of those on our website, but there's a lot of really good ones out there from, whether it be the National Apartment Association or big, companies like that. And I'd say find those resources take that survey in an honest way and figure out what you're doing well and what you can be doing better.
Give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
Yeah, so it's a book called Radical Candor by Kim Scott. This is a book about kind of leadership and how to communicate with folks at work. I've read it myself many times. Radical Candor is one of our cultural pillars, and every new hire at NurtureBoss gets one of these. And I highly recommend giving that book a read.
Give me a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals.
Yeah, so that's a good question. I have a lot of daily habits, whether it be going to the gym, meditating, things like that. But what I think is worth mentioning is having the daily habit, whatever it is, the secret for me. It's discipline in any form is beneficial. I think that it's really easy to give into procrastination or laziness. The hard thing to do is to get up and do that thing every day that you don't want to do. And I think that's a really freeing thing. So for me, the daily habit is not as important as the fact that you should have a daily habit, and that discipline is key.
Love it. All right. Give me your number one insight for, we normally say investing, but in this case, I'm going to say communications and being an effective communicator.
Yeah. So I think my number one insight for being an effective communicator is have a brand, know it, love it, live it, talk it, and take it seriously. The way that you show up to a conversation, whether it be with a friend or whether it be with a prospect you want to move into your property, be true to your brand and who you are, and make sure that the things you do and say are in line with that brand. I think that goes a really long way in building trust and being authentic to yourself, which people like authenticity. People like a story they can follow, and people buy into that.
Jacob, where are you located?
Scottsdale, Arizona.
All right. So Scottsdale, Arizona. It's hot right there, I'm sure. but
yeah.
But some food options. Give me your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
Ooh, so this changes a lot. Today, I'd say my favorite is Chelsea's Kitchen. That's on 40th Street in Camelback, if you're ever here and you want to Google it. But ask me next week and it might be different.
Sounds good. Chelsea's Kitchen is the answer right now, but it could change by the time we get out there. Jacob, listen, a lot of great information. I appreciate you sharing how your journey as a renter really inspired you to create this product, NurtureBoss, that helps both investors and property managers improve and be effective with communication. And a couple of key insights that stood out. One, you want to make sure you respond at least within 24 hours, but optimally within the first 2 hours to any lead from a resident standpoint. And I think that's a great insight that you can take with you. And then the second thing is just make sure that you find ways to create sound communication for that resident. It helps with retention and ultimately it boosts the bottom line. So really important for your business. Again, if you want to reach out to Jacob or learn more about NurtureBoss, you can go to nurtureboss.io. Jacob, I want to thank you again for coming on the show. I hope you have a great day.
Thanks for having me.